This happened over 20 years ago. I was driving back home with my girlfriend at the time. It was Christmas Eve, and my mother's family used to hold a large celebration at my aunt's house in Estacada. This was my girlfriend's first time meeting with my extended family, but she got on quite well with them. We spent the majority of the afternoon and evening talking, playing poker, opening presents, and drinking an assortment of alcohol. My girlfriend had been quite inebriated by the time we had to leave. Therefore, I'd be driving us home. It was around 11 PM or so. I was driving my girlfriend's car along Highway 211. Now, this stretch of road is surrounded by farms and dense patches of forest, and parts of it are unlit. But nothing to fear. I grew up in this area, so I knew this road like the back of my hand. The two of us were just driving and talking away, two young lovers making the most of our moments together. There's a portion of the highway that descends down an enormous hill before crossing Deep Creek. Surrounding both sides of the road were thick forests. There were no lights. The only thing we could see was the area directly in front of our headlights. I drove down the hill, crossed the bridge, and uphill through more forest. It's as the highway started to flatten out that it happened. Something sprinted across the road so suddenly that I almost hit whatever it was. I slammed on the brakes and turned to my girlfriend to ask her if she saw it. She confirmed that she had, but she couldn't make out what it was. Maybe it was a coyote, as they are a fairly common sight in this area. But something felt off about it. Whatever it was that ran in front of the car disappeared into the woods next to the road. Coyotes don't usually just dart in front of cars. Not like that anyway. So for some reason, I decided to check it out. I turned the car around and switched on the high beams to better light up the forest in which this thing had just vanished into. I stepped out of the car and walked towards the woods. I couldn't see anything, but now it felt like perhaps I'd made a grave error. My heart was pounding, and the hairs on the back of my neck were standing at full attention. But I still didn't see anything unusual in the trees. Suddenly, I heard the car's horn blast. It wasn't a that you'd hear if, say, the driver or passenger wanted you to hurry up and get in the car. No, this was a long blaring. I walked back to the car and got in, and asked my girlfriend why she leaned on the horn like that. She said nothing. Instead, she pointed to a spot about 50 feet from where I was standing. I looked over in that direction, and that's when I saw it. Surely, this was the thing that ran out in front of our car. It was a man. He was completely naked. His skin was covered in dirt and mud, and in one of his hands, he was holding a hatchet. He looked back at us, and then he smiled and waved to us, just before turning around and walking back into the forest. Needless to say, we got the hell out of there. Once we were safely driving again, my girlfriend explained what had just happened. Whilst I was trying to look for the man in the area he initially vanished in, he circled back around and came out from another spot in the forest, beyond my car headlights. My girlfriend had seen something out of the corner of her eye, and that's when she saw him. Before she honked the horn, he was walking towards me, his hatchet raised as if preparing to strike me. We called the authorities once we got safely back home, but they never found anybody, or they did and just didn't tell us. But the officer we spoke to explained his theory. The man was obviously looking to ambush unsuspecting lone travelers for Lord only knows what reason. We all agreed that my girlfriend's quick thinking saved my life, as it let my potential killer know that I wasn't alone out there. I moved back into the area recently, so I now drive that highway often. No naked hatchet man sightings yet, but I can tell you that I'm definitely extra vigilant now, especially near Deep Creek. So, this actually happened today, probably about 10 hours ago, and the more I think about it, the creepier it is. I'm a guy, and my older sister needed to do the rest of her Christmas shopping today and had a list of places she wanted to go to that included our local mall in Northern Virginia. I accompanied her because 1, she's a very petite person and people normally find her to be attractive, so she gets the typical teenage/20s guys that oh so smoothly walk past us more than once for no reason. And 2, she needed ideas on what to get me, so I was supposed to point out some things to her. Being that I recently got my new holster and own a concealed handgun permit, I decided I would conceal carry today. Well, we'd looked at a couple of stores, Hot Topic, American Eagle, etc., and we were running out of places to look, and I admittedly hadn't given her very many options for gifts when we decided to go to Spencer's, because hey, they had t-shirts and some throwbacks to my childhood, like classic Nickelodeon stuff. Well, we were in the back of the store looking at t-shirts, having no such luck at finding anything I liked or that was in my size. Go figure this close to Christmas, when this guy, in maybe his late 30s to early 40s, relatively short dark hair, and a long goatee, average build, maybe 5'8", came right up next to us and started looking at the same stuff. This alone wasn't very suspicious. Granted, we were the only 2 people near the back of the store, but there's plenty of merchandise, so whatever. And I can see he's just carrying a small coffee, so normal enough. He then looked at me and said, "They got a lot of stuff in this store." Which if you've been to Spencer's, you'll know they also sell adult items in the back of the store, the opposite side from where we were. So I just said, "Yeah," and we kept looking. After a while, this guy was not really looking at merchandise anymore, but weirdly, looking at my sister and I, which I attributed to another guy finding my sister attractive, so no big deal. We finished looking and started walking away, going around a rack of clearance shirts and whatnot, and he followed, right on our tails, all the way around this rack of clothing. By now, I was creeped out, so I was keeping an eye on him, and my hand, which normally was just sitting at my side to cover my gun, that happened to be slightly sticking out of the bottom of my shirt, was now resting on the bottom of my holster. My sister was quite obviously creeped out by this guy now, and I have to admit, even though I'm 5'10", 215 pounds, I was weirded out by him. Maybe that's the paranoia of having law enforcement family members, but something just did not feel right. So we looked at each other, and she said,
"Okay, are you ready to leave?"
To which I said yeah, and pointed towards the front of the store, where all of the employees and customers were. As we were walking away, I heard a, "Hey man," come from behind me, which I knew was this creepy guy. I didn't really want to talk to him after he had made me feel so uncomfortable, so we kept on moving, with my sister probably a good 5 feet in front of me, because I know if anything, I'm not letting him be between me and her. This lack of response did not stop him, so yet again, I heard a, "Hey man," from behind me, to which I turned slightly, my holster side away from him, to see his hand outstretched towards me, like he wanted to shake. Now, despite understanding what this gesture meant, I said, "What?" because I didn't really see a reason to shake hands with this guy, and he responded with, "Well, it was nice to meet you anyways," which wouldn't be a very creepy statement if it weren't for the fact that we literally did not talk at all, other than the one comment he had made before. My choice of response of, "No, I'm good man," did not sit well with this guy. He then decided, "Yeah, well, fuck you too, man," was an appropriate counter, which didn't faze me, as I had already turned around to walk away. I guess he had hoped I'd turn back around and say something, because when I didn't, he followed up with a, "Fuck you, you bald-headed motherfucker." I prefer a military-style haircut, so my hair was short. Whilst this small altercation was taking place, my sister was doing what our original plan was, and walking towards the exit. The distance between us had increased, so she was unaware until the last insult, which was yelled at me. She whipped around not knowing what the hell was going on, and looked at me asking,
"What?"
I responded with, "Just keep walking," knowing it wasn't worth the effort to engage with this now hostile creeper, and that if he exited the store after us, then I would escalate accordingly. which thankfully it did not. We immediately went to a different store in the mall, where we had a second to process what the hell just happened and theorize on his intentions. Needless to say, my adrenaline was pumping for several minutes afterwards, and I was constantly looking over my shoulder until we left the mall a few minutes later.
Before I continue with the final story, if you've enjoyed this video so far, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe to see future content from me, as well as help me in the algorithm. Thank you.
This is a weird story that I still can't quite figure out, but I'm pondering again, now that it's almost Christmas. If anyone has any idea of what might be going on, or has any tips for what to do, please share it. I'd be very grateful for any help. A little over 4 years ago, I moved in with my sister Ellen, who is 2 years older than me. She bought the apartment around June 2010, so when she received a Christmas card the following Christmas, addressed to someone named Ida, we didn't think much of it, as we thought it was probably meant for the person who lived there before us. One thing about the card was odd though. The only signature was a male name, and then the name of the town. That particular town is known for its mental institution for dangerous and insane criminals. There's only about 4,000 people living there, so when you hear the name of the town, the infamous institution is what you think of. We brushed it off as a mistake, figuring the person who lived there before us didn't give their new address to the man sending the card. We had almost forgotten about it when the same thing happened the following Christmas. It was signed with the same sender and receiver as the year before. A little creeped out, since we now remembered that the occupant before us was an old man who had passed away after living there for decades. We ignored it once again, since nothing could be done. Now this is when things got even stranger. My sister has both of our parents' surnames, since they didn't marry until a month after she was born. She had decided to use our mum's name, which was more uncommon, and I had decided to use our dad's name, which is one of the most common surnames in Sweden. This is important because the next Christmas, 2012, I had moved back home to live with my dad, about 20 miles away in the middle of nowhere. A couple of days before Christmas, my sister came to stay with us too during the holidays. The next day, there was a new card in our mailbox. It had my sister's address on it as per usual, and the same sender and receiver again, but it was delivered to our dad's mailbox. This mailbox doesn't have her surname on it, since our mum passed away years before this. The card couldn't possibly have been delivered by the mailman, since there is no connection between the two addresses. Still, it had prints on the stamp. The only explanation I can think of is that whoever sent the card must have picked it up at my sister's after noticing that she wasn't home, and then somehow, probably through Facebook, figured out where she was. That's all the stories I have for today. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers, as we are so close. And also consider watching some of my previous content. Thank you.